A long, long time ago, in a city far, far away, lie two golden statues, one of Romeo Montague and one of Juliet Capulet, a star-crossed couple who ended their lives as a result of an ongoing feud between the Montague and the Capulet families. Romeo and Juliet, situated in Verona, Italy, is a tragic story of two lovers from opposing families going through hidden marriages, fake deaths, fights, and much more for each other, only to die in the end for each other. One of the most important parts in this play is where Juliet is forced to either marry a man named Paris or be disowned. As Paris is roughly 25 to 29 years old, twice Juliet's age, he is not of particular interest to her, but rather in Lord Capulet's business connections. Let's take a look at hold up. Juliet's 13? I was 13 last year. I really don't think anyone would imagine getting forced to marry a random rich guy or girl who is 12 years older than you, especially considering that it would have been last year for most of us. Let's take a look at just how unlikely Romeo and Juliet would be if it was situated in the modern world. Just in the start of the story, there's already an issue. Not many families, even in extremely powerful positions, have the same sort of feud as seen in Romeo and Juliet. There are still possible political or even business conflicts like what people suspect happened in Romeo and Juliet, but none of which end up in sword fights in the streets that leave people dead. However, say that instead of just two families, it's two opposing gangs, similar to what we saw in the remake movies starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. So, in some filthy ghetto on the outskirts of Verona, Italy, there are two opposing gangs. Of course, like any normal gang, they fight. Romeo, the son of one of the Montague leaders, is desperately in love with a girl called Rosaline. However, Rosaline doesn't think of him the same way. As good friends, Benvolio and Mercutio bring Romeo to crash the Capulet ball and search for other fair maidens. Which brings us to another problem. Which family in their right mind still holds balls for their 13-year-old daughter because they need a rich guy with a high status to marry her already? Which mom bursts into their daughter's room just to talk about how, by my counts, I was your mother much upon these years, that you are now a maid, thus then in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love. This basically translates to Juliet, a 13-year-old, being still a virgin while his mother was already having her at that age, and some 25-year-old rich guy wants her. Outside of places like the royal family, there are little cases of marriage still being used to maintain status and money. Even less marriages with such an age gap and the younger being 13. And just the fact that an arranged marriage was set up is nothing that we would see in 2021. According to Eureka Alert, over the past 30 years, women have become more financially independent and are more likely to play an equal part in the income of a family. Both sides are now equally believed to assume financial obligations, make major changes, and handle financial matters. This means that Paris may never have been an option now, as Juliet and her family do not need to rely on a man for their income. Say all the stars lined up just like how they did for Romeo and Juliet, though. Two extremely rich gangs that still consider marriage as a crucial part in upholding power, who don't understand that Juliet can also make her own money, and ones of which marriage is so important that the fact that their daughter is only 13 doesn't bother them. Let's continue through the story then. After meeting each other at the ball, Romeo meets Juliet at her balcony. Turns out Juliet is also mad in love with Romeo, but since there is so much beef between the Montagues and the Capulets, they have to keep their relationship a secret. Somehow, Romeo and Juliet are so madly in love with each other that they immediately run to Friar Lawrence to get married the next day. Romeo says, "As mine on hers, so hers is set on mine, and all combined, save what thou must combine." This, especially in nowadays standards, is near impossible. According to the University of Virginia magazine, young people today are less secure in the idea of committing to and being in a lasting marriage. With more than 40% of unmarried adults in America finding marriage as obsolete, it is very unlikely that, especially at such a young age and only 2 days after meeting each other, Romeo and Juliet would be willing to commit to staying with each other forever. Say that all the stars line up still. Two extremely rich gangs that still consider marriage as a crucial part in upholding power, which don't understand that Juliet can also make her own money, ones of which marriage is so important that the fact that their daughter is 13 doesn't bother them, and whom have children who are so crazy in love after a day of meeting that they are willing to marry. Later, Tybalt challenges Benvolio and Mercutio to a duel. Romeo tries to calm them down, but to no avail. Mercutio ends up killed, which causes Romeo to seek revenge. Tybalt dies in this revenge fight. Fights like these rarely happen anymore, especially in such rich families. Esteemed, well-educated families of such high status would never participate in such fights, especially ones with swords and that result in death. Keep in mind that we have changed the setting to gangs though, so this can be excused. The Prince of Verona has had enough of all this gang violence and exiles Romeo as punishment. And for that offense, immediately we do exile him hence. I have an interest in your heart's proceeding. My blood for your rude brawls doth lie a-bleeding. Nowadays, getting exiled isn't a thing anymore. For example, according to Brian Palmer from Slate, 16 states in the US have declared banishment unconstitutional. Many others have outlawed exiling people. The closest practice we have now is deportation, which is, according to Britannica, expulsion by executive agency of an alien whose presence in a country is deemed unlawful or detrimental. In Romeo's case, he would likely have been dealt with in a different way, most likely jailed instead of exiled. Now that Juliet has no apparent option except to marry the old pedo Paris, she goes to Friar Lawrence once again. Friar Lawrence gives Juliet a potion that will cause such a deep sleep that Juliet seems dead. Friar Lawrence writes a letter to Romeo explaining that Juliet is not actually dead, but this letter never reaches him. Romeo instead hears that Juliet is actually dead and decides that he will be with her in her death if he cannot physically. Because he is so madly in love with Juliet, he cannot live without her. He goes to find an apothecary whom he buys a vial of poison from. He visits Juliet's dead body and drinks this poison to die with her. Juliet wakes up right after this and sees his dead body. She decides the same thing and kills herself with Romeo's dagger. Romeo and Juliet is an impactful story of two victims of forbidden love, showing how powerful love can be. As much as we want to believe that Romeo and Juliet still can happen in real life, for the plot of Romeo and Juliet to happen in the modern world, there would need to be two extremely rich opposing gangs. These gangs must still think of marriage as an important part in upholding power, with a belief so strong that they are willing to force a 13-year-old to marry. These families must not understand that a girl can make her own money. Romeo and Juliet must be so madly in love and still willing to commit to a marriage in 2021, so much so that they marry the day after meeting each other. Romeo and Juliet must be willing to look for illegal substances that don't exist in the first place, and, of course, sacrifice their lives to stay with each other. True love does not come in one shape and size, though. Romeo and Juliet's story is only one of countless examples of true love. Even if Romeo and Juliet's story cannot happen again, aspects of the story and its portrayal of love still lives on in society today.